This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
10:08 at WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and time for a very special edition of Ask a Lawyer, because Stuart M is not going to be here this morning. However, this is also a special edition of Ask a Rabbi with Rabbi Shafir Lobb from Congregation Eitz Chayim, and I have a riddle for her this morning.
What is your riddle this morning?
What does a lawyer and a rabbi have in common?
You know, I'll bet it's a special relationship with law.
Absolutely. A special relationship with law, including maybe a more than better understanding of it than most average folks. But hey, you have to have a love for the law as well.
Absolutely.
Sure. Alrighty.
And I think it's even more than a love of law. It's a love of people.
Uh-huh.
And, that's... So here's a clue to all my students who have this question on their final. Okay. There's a question that says, according to a rabbi in the textbook, it's not me, but a different rabbi, what is the primary way that we take care of, that we serve God? Mm-hmm. And it is by saving lives and making people's lives better.
Ooh.
So, yeah, right. That's the way that we do it, by being God's partners in taking care of, or caretaking for, the world. Okay. And that's a really important part. As you said, part of that's the law. Part of it, sometimes Torah, the word Torah, is translated as law. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we had a little better understanding of it. Yes, there are laws and guidelines and things like that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I once passed a church marquee that said, "What are they? The 10 guidelines." And as I passed it, I thought, yeah, that's exactly what they are. Because, for example, the last one, right? You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Uh-huh. Who's going to know that?
Right.
Go take you into a court of law? I don't think so. That's not about a court of law. That's about when you covet something, right? It consumes you.
Because you don't have what your neighbor has, and you want to have it.
And you want to have it. And so you get into that, keeping up with the Joneses kind of mentality, and you're not being the caretaker of the world. And so I think that's really a critical item. There are 10, Judaism calls them 10 utterances, the 10 dibrot, the 10 things that God said, or 10 of the many things that God says that are recounted and collected in scriptures. So Torah is the first 5 books. It's what we commonly call Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I'm having to think for a second for the Latin names as opposed to the Hebrew names for them.
Leviticus sort of reads like a medical journal, doesn't it?
It's probably the driest of them, but yet it's got some of the most beautiful pieces in it. At the very middle of the book of Leviticus is love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Good medicine.
Yeah, not bad medicine at all, right? If we can learn to love both our neighbors and ourselves, then the world will be a better place. Because love is an interesting piece. And I'm also going to go with believe. And I think those two, right, believe, beloved, and then to understand a little bit, you read in the dictionary those words, and it says etymology unknown. I always love that. Right, that's where they haven't tracked down the word, or they haven't come up with what enough scholars agree on is the beginning of that word. But believe, beloved, I think those are related, and I think they're connected to the word in Hebrew, belev, in your heart. Lev is your heart. And the ancients understood that as the place of feeling, the place of connection, the place of creating community. And so if something is beloved, if something is believed, believe, you can really kind of hear it, I think. And maybe it's just an accident. Sometimes it is that 2 words sound alike between 2 different languages.
This is common in the English language, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is common. English has a lot of words that come from all kinds of different places that people don't know. But if you hold something in your heart, truly, truly hold it in your heart, then you want the best for it.
Okay.
You want it to be healthy. You want it to be happy. You know, and sometimes for people or for animals, that means letting it go. You know, there was a GIF that somebody had on Facebook that was of a rescuer, one of the people who work with wildlife and let them go. Right? They foster them, heal them, and then release them turn them loose. And it's a picture of this woman letting go of a little penguin.
Oh.
And, you know, and she puts it down, and it kind of looks back at her, and then it hears the wave, and you can see it turn around and looking at the wave, and it runs a little bit toward the wave, and then it turns around and looks at her again, and, you know, you can see that it's
kind of tossed between which way it wants to go.
Right, which way it wants to go, and eventually it goes out into the water and swims away. And, you know, my thought was, oh my gosh, what a strong person it takes, what a deep love it takes to be able to let the animal go back into the wild and not want to own and possess it.
Yeah.
Right? You know, because we often think that if we love something that we have to have it. But if we really love something, then we have to be willing to let it go.
Well, also, wild animals don't make good pets.
No. A penguin would not be a good pet. It would not be good for it. And so, you know, that's something to be keenly aware of. And yeah. So anyway, this is a special edition of Ask a Rabbi, and please do give me a call at 772-340-1590, and we can take on any questions that you might have for us. And I can see we've got some things tweaking over there. That's a good thing. And I want to thank everybody who's joined me and is watching here on Facebook Live, because we do live stream, and then, of course, it is archived onto YouTube at Ask a Rabbi. So you can find it either now or later. And so we're talking a little bit about a love of law, a love of people. And it's important to note that when Adam, or human, Adam means human. It's to me, the depth of scriptures is in understanding, for me, obviously, the Hebrew underneath it, because that gives us a lot more insight. Right? Adam's name means human. Ben Adam is a human being, so a child of Adam, or a member of the human race. And Eve's name means life. Yeah. So we talk of them as Adam and Eve as if that was, you know, had no meaning beyond a name, but it does have meaning. And when Adam is naming things, think of a child, right? That's how you start teaching a child language, right? You show them table, chair, tiger, lion. You know, I teach English as a second language, and I'm thinking right now of a lesson that I had last night, right? A little lesson was I walk through the jungle. I see a tiger, I see a monkey, I see a snake, I see, I forget what the other animal, a parrot. Right? So you're naming these words, and then you're using them in sentences. I see a tiger, you know, the tiger walks in the jungle. And, you know, very, very beginnings of language, and that's what Adam is doing. Right? Adam is learning or acquiring language, which is important. And when it's hello, I don't have, okay, there we go. I didn't hear me in the.
Oh, I was just testing
testing
the Skype for the next broadcast.
Ah, okay. Which would be Ask a Rabbi. Oh, no, first for.
Would normally be Ask a Rabbi.
Normally would be Ask a Rabbi, but we've got kids.
The Christmas Kids.
Yeah, the Christmas Kids, the toys for the kids.
Now, do we need an abbreviated Ask a Lawyer for 11:30 to 12? We might have one. I don't.
No. This is a full hour for.
Okay.
And then it's a half hour for the kids.
Right.
And that is how that works. So, so we're full.
Okay.
Which is good. That gives plenty of people a chance to call 772-340-1590. And of course, you are also welcome to join Congregation Eitz Chayim any Friday night at 7:30. And that's at 540 Northwest University Boulevard, Suite 102. It's the Blue Office buildings in West Park. We're located right next to the elevator, that front area, and it says Eitz Chayim in the window, so you can find us easily. Suite 102. And that's right just about across from Met Stadium, from First Data Field, and just past the county sport complex, between that and the college. So pretty good place to be, easy to find. And we welcome you there any Friday night at 7:30. Our services are open to all. And Shabbat morning, Saturday morning at 10:30, we have services as well. Come January, we'll resume with our Stolen Moments, which is an hour of scripture study, Torah study, the hour before services. So those are some of the exciting things that we've got going on. We've got the Night of 10,000 Lights coming in December. December is the beginning of the Festival of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights for us, 8 days of celebration, and that starts the evening of the 22nd. And the following Friday, I'm forgetting exactly what date that is, but I guess I can pull that up on my calendar very quickly here. It is December 27th. We'll have a special Hanukkah gathering with latkes and jelly donuts and, pastelikas, which is the Sephardi Hanukkah food. So lots of good food to be eaten, and bring a Chanukiah. We'll have a couple of spares, not too many, but you're welcome to bring your own Chanukiah, and bring with it 7 candles, because it'll be the 6th night. And the festival goes for 8 nights, of course, and we add a candle each night. So some more celebration. We'll talk more and more about that as we get closer to it. So, yeah, as you said, it's being a rabbi is often about wanting to help people resolve things. And so there's 2 things that they ask when you are to be ordained. You stand up and they ask the community of rabbis, can this one teach? Can this one judge? Right? So can you be fair between people? It's not whether or not you know the law per se, but whether you know how to apply the law. Right? And as you said, that has to do with loving people and loving the instructions.
And a lawyer would handle the secular law.
Right. Although Jewish law, as is the case with Sharia and most religious law, has to do very often with things like who gets the kid in the event of a divorce.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, those are hard questions, right? Who gets the inheritance when there's a dispute? How do you settle those kinds of things? Mm-hmm. And I'm always reminded of a book that Rabbi Elliot Dorff wrote, and in the very first chapter, there's a little footnote where he talks about how he came to have love, because he's considered one of the halachic experts in the Jewish world. And he recounts a story. It's in a footnote. Right? People often don't read the footnotes, which is sad, because a lot of good information's in the footnotes. But he talks about being a young boy and walking with his dad and coming into the rabbi's office and sitting on the desk, on the rabbi's desk. There's an old couple in front of the desk, in front of the rabbi. And on the desk is a chicken. It's in the butcher wrap, and it's sitting there open on the desk. And the rabbi's talking with the couple about, how's business been this week, and how's everybody in the family, and all different kinds of things. And at the end of it, he wraps up the chicken, hands it to them, and says, "Yes, it's kosher. Have a good Shabbos," because they want to have chicken for the Sabbath meal, because the Sabbath meal is our weekly Thanksgiving, our weekly Thanksgiving meal. And so it's very often a more festive meal than during the week. It's a big deal. And so the couple walks off with the chicken, and young Dorff asks the rabbi, why did you have that long-winded discussion? The chicken is either kosher or it's not. And the rabbi answers young Dorff, if you think the chicken is the only thing that determines if it's kosher, if it's fit, then you don't understand the instructions. You don't understand the law. And all right, so here's the reasoning that's behind it, which he then later explains, which is that they're clearly not a very, very poor couple, because if they were desperately poor, then any chicken would do. Right.
True.
They're also not extremely wealthy, because if they were extremely wealthy, then they would toss that chicken to somebody who was poor and get another chicken, because it's not worth the time and effort to figure out if it's okay. So they're right on that edge, on that fence, that cusp of they're poor enough that they can't afford easily to buy another chicken.
What constitutes kosher with chicken?
With a chicken, what's kosher is it can't have certain blemishes in it. It has to be a healthy animal when it was slaughtered. In other words, it can't have died. It can't have died diseased.
Okay.
And so very often they'll look at organs and things like that to make sure that the animal was in fact healthy, and it isn't that they caught that one because it was so weak that it was going to keel over and die in the next 10 minutes anyway.
Wow. That's not one to eat.
That's not one that you'd want to eat. And a way to look at that, it's not as much about whether or not that animal is fit for you, because the understanding is that you're not going to knowingly eat something that's going to make you sick.
Okay.
But it's more about you might want to bend the rules if you have to serve a big meal, and that's when it's even more important to not bend the rules, to make sure that the animal is not a carrier for disease that's then going to make your guests sick. And so the rabbi explains that this animal, this chicken, is not quite healthy but not quite sick. It's right on the edge. Otherwise, they wouldn't ask the question. Right? And so the question is, have they had a good week where they really can't afford to go back and buy another chicken but just don't want to? Or has business been so bad that they'd rather not have this chicken, but they can't afford to buy another one? All right? And so the rabbi's looking and sounding out to see where they are and what's the real issue for the couple. And it's really not the chicken itself.
How about that?
All right? Because they know that it could go one way or the other, or they wouldn't bring it to the rabbi.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Because it was clearly good or clearly bad, they could make that decision without taking it to a rabbi.
Okay.
But, this particular chicken,
Okay.
So that's a little bit of an insight into how rabbis, as you say, adjudicate.
Okay.
Right? How they look at what the rules are and see what the wiggle room is. And inside that
eliminating the gray area.
Right. Well, walking through the gray area. Yeah. Right. And figuring out how to do that in a way that is the most beneficial for everyone involved.
Okay.
And it's different decisions, different times, and it's not just about the chicken.
All right.
Right, because and the rabbi knows without even looking that clearly this is not going to be an easy cut and dry. It's not good or easy, it's good. It's going to be right on the edge, or he wouldn't be asked to pass judgment.
Okay.
And so that's a little bit of an insight into some of the roles that rabbis play, particularly in more traditional. I've never passed on whether or not a chicken is kosher, but I have monitored kitchens to see that when food is prepared, it is prepared properly, and that the chefs are taking the proper precautions, washing the food correctly. Washing is very, very important. Washing hands before you handle food.
That's been a tradition that's been around a couple thousand years.
Yeah, it's even worth noting that when Hillel and Shammai and Yochai and a whole bunch of different rabbis are having a discussion about, how do you welcome in a convert? And one of the answers is after they learn to wash their hands. Right? So that's that shows you that that's a really big part of doing it. And, I unfortunately had to officiate at a funeral. That comes with the job as well. And so one of the things that happens at a funeral is that you wash your hands when you're done burying somebody before you go into the home of the family, the mourning family, because you're going to be handling food, right? So people have this great big mystique about, there's evil spirits, and no, it's not. You've had your hands in dirt. You've been handling, a dead body. Granted, today it's a little more removed, and you lower the casket mechanically, and and we bury in caskets. They used to bury in shrouds. In fact, in Israel, they still will bury in shrouds, as do the Muslim countries. They'll bury in shrouds rather than caskets. And so you've got your hands much more on, even though the body's been washed. And again, Islam and Judaism both have a requirement of washing and purifying the body before it's buried, so that those who handle it are not, in fact, going to pick up a disease from it. And so the person, sorry about that, we are all animals, but when the person is laid to rest, your hands get dirty. Whether you're handling the shovel or you're
whether
handling...
you can see the dirt or not. If
Yeah.
it's microscopic
and
viruses
also
or bacteria.
and also the dirt with which you cover
Right.
the body or the casket. You can get that on you. One of the things that I often do as I'm leaving a cemetery is to brush off the dust, because you've broken the earth surface, and so that's part of what's happening. Your hands are dirty. They're dirty from having been in the soil. And so you wash that before you handle food, particularly to feed the family that's grieving, because the family that's grieving, their immune system is under stress due to the grief process. And they're much more likely to come down with something so much more important that we wash our hands. And, we now know, right, that most colds, most diseases are often transmitted.
Yeah, what do all the doctors say now? You go into the hospital.
Wash your hands.
There's little hand washing stations where
Everywhere.
you can disinfect your hands real quickly. Yeah.
Right. That's one of the big things when I was a chaplain, was to remember that you need to wash your hands walking into each patient's room, because they're already in the hospital. You don't need to give them an extra illness.
Right.
They don't need to come home with more than they arrived with. And that's paramount. And clergy, particularly, because we do often touch and handle and hug a patient. Yeah. And so being very mindful of protocol. And in fact, I used to carry a little spray bottle that had a cleanser in it. And if I did a lot of hugging and connecting with people, I would spray between that person and before I walked into the next one. Yeah. And so those are just some of the considerations. That's caretaking for God's creation, and that's the instruction that Adam's given. Not that you should be Lord and Master over the world, but that you should be the world's shepherd. Very, very different point, right? God is our shepherd, and we are the shepherd of parts of God's flock. We're the delegate shepherd, if you will. And that means watching, caring for the herd, and doing what the planet needs to be its healthiest. And people often miss that. They think that, the world's here to serve me and I'm the kingpin. And it's like, no, that's not what Scripture is teaching at all.
I know I've seen that mentality.
Yeah, so have I, far too often.
Yep. Wow, it's amazing.
Especially as we're here on a Black Friday, right? So
yeah.
I'm hoping everybody's finding those deals and that everybody's doing it safely. Nobody's getting trampled. It ain't worth trampling somebody.
No, because those prices are nice and low right now for a reason. Just take your time.
Yeah, and they'll stay low. It's worth pointing out. I guess it was last year. I think it was last year that I had a reason I had ordered something online, and they notified me, of course, that it came in on Good Friday, and if you don't pick it up today, then blah, blah, blah. So, I needed to go in, and I went in to the stores at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was very easy to go. And, now stuff, of course, was obviously picked over we only have 3 of this item at a ridiculously low price to get all of you in the store. Those items were long gone, but I wasn't looking for that. But there were still plenty of really good buys in the store. It's a good time to go shopping if you want to do if you want to do Black Friday shopping, do it late in the day. And of course, we're doing a lot more on the phone and on the internet. Lots of cyber shopping, And
I think there's a special Friday for that too coming up.
well, they've got all kinds of things.
Cyber Monday.
Cyber Monday, yeah, because with the things you didn't get when you tried to crash into Friday, and over the weekend, of course, people are doing all kinds of things. So so Cyber Monday, right? There'll be all kinds of deals, and Amazon even tried during the year to have Amazon or Prime Day, right? Mm-hmm. Where they do free shipping or something like that. So there's all kinds of different ways to look at it. So an invitation for people to buy what they need, buy the gifts that are appropriate, and not go bankrupt.
All right.
Yeah.
And not go bankrupt.
And not go bankrupt, right?
Yeah. Or try not to get into debt at Christmas.
Yeah.
People go get a new credit card.
People get overexcited with the fever of buying.
Yeah.
And, if one is good, 700 is better. No, not really.
No, the payments are going to be due every month.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to be careful.
Yeah. So, and starting off the year in debt, probably not your best bet.
Right.
So hopefully people have taken to heart some shopping things. Mm-hmm. Now, this year with Hanukkah starting on the latter part of December, we're going to see a mutual shopping time coming almost up to Christmas for Jews. Maybe even, if you haven't gotten all your gifts for people for Hanukkah, of course, we've got 8 days. So that's, here's a really good.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. And this year, that means there's going to be after Christmas specials for you to buy those last couple gifts.
Just in time for Hanukkah.
Just in time for Hanukkah. Every once in a while, the calendar gives us this little gift. Hanukkah can occur anywhere from shortly after or almost at Thanksgiving to almost into January, or actually a little bit into January. It moves around a lot. So why does it move around a lot? Because it's based on a lunar calendar and not a solar calendar. Oh. Yeah. You see, Julian, who created the Julian calendar, was more of a sun worshiper than anything else. And so he set a calendar up to connect to the orbit of the Earth around the sun, rather than the cycles of the moon, which were very easy for people to see. You need a little bit fancier stuff. And we see that in a lot of cultures, right, where they keep track of the equinoxes and the solstices. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that tells you when to plant which crops. The sun governs when the crops come up. The moon does its thing, and the
moon marks the harvest, right?
Well, the moon not so much marks the there's 12 and some moons in a solar year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you need to and that's why ancient cultures such as the Chinese and the Jewish have leap months is to align the lunar calendar to the solar calendar. The Islamic calendar doesn't do that because Muhammad was not a farming community, and so they went with 12 months because that's an easy number. It's close to a year, and so the Islamic year is a little bit shorter. It's only 12 lunar months, and it slides. It takes it 33 years to go and come back to the same part of the solar year. Oh. But because so much of the ancient Jewish and the ancient Chinese cultures were agrarian, were farming communities, they had to stick to the cycle of the sun, and they had to jiggle the moon cycle so that it balanced out. And there's a very complex calculation about it. The ancient rabbis spend time talking about who can calculate and determine when and what. Wow. And so they set a number of different criteria that if certain things aren't happening in the countryside, like if the barley isn't sprouting, then you put in an extra month before you get to spring. Okay. And that adjusts it to the solar calendar. But Julian went with a solar calendar of 365 days. And as we know now, 365, not quite a year. It's 365 and almost a quarter. Yeah. Right? And so
0.24 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So it's a leap year if it's divisible by 4, but not if it's divisible by 100, but it is if it's divisible by 400, right? So even that starts to get rather complicated because the calendar, the solar system is not perfect in its orbit.
Ooh.
It's good,
Yeah.
but it's not perfect, and there's wobble.
Okay.
That's right. Some days are 24 hours and a couple of seconds. Other days are 23 hours, 59 minutes, and some number of seconds. And every once in a while, they adjust us to the world clock, and we have a leap second because they want to keep things synced. But the ancients, what they did is they set up something, and when the sun came at a certain place, then it lines up and it creates this marker that says, okay, it's the solstice or it's the equinox, and we can mark these things.
There have been some monuments or stone buildings over the years that have had alignment viewing points in them.
Yeah, right. And can you imagine the work it would take anciently to
mathematically
figure that out and map it?
Wow.
But because the cycle of the year is so important, if you don't plant the winter wheat in August, you got to plant it closer to the winter. And so knowing these dates is very, very important. It's also important to know when to start separating the boy sheep from the girl sheep, because the girls are going to start to get really, and the boys are going to want, and
That's why maybe people are referred to as sheep.
Sheep and goats, yeah. Well, because that's getting back to that idea of shepherding. That the point is not whether or not, every individual is critical and important and brings something into the world that no other individual can bring. That's a tenet in most religions, that every individual is critically important. And at the same time, what really matters is the continuation of the species more than, more easy for me to say, more than the continuation of any one individual. Even the ancients got it. We're all guaranteed to pass on. We're all guaranteed to die. It's the thing you can be assured of as soon as you're born, that at some point you're going to stop. You're going to stop breathing. And, and then somebody else carries on. And it's not about whether or not you've become the most magnificent and glorious thing on the planet, but it's whether or not people have moved a little closer to being sure that they'll continue to exist. And, it's naive to think that we can do that without having a healthy ecosystem.
We have to have a healthy ecosystem.
We do not have a healthy ecosystem right now. We do need to work at that. But we're learning some things. I've got some encouragement. One of the things that I enjoyed seeing recently was the incorporation of trees into cities.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and we've seen
ordinances.
An ordinance allowing for it, in fact, sometimes requiring it, right? Dispensation for apartment houses that have trees on the terraces, because we understand now that trees do a ton of work cleaning the environment. And some cities have even gone to putting some plants on busy roads in the dividers and things like that, because it makes a difference.
Yes.
Cities like Phoenix are putting in roof gardens to cool down the city, because too much asphalt, too much pavement, too much stone roof, or whatever it is that's on the roof, making the city too hot. And that having a profound effect. So wanting to put a little bit of ground and some cacti or something up there.
Anything
or as we say in Arizona, cactuses,
Cacti, cactuses.
Having some cactus up there. And, but we're learning some of those things. And though that's critical learning, but that comes from paying attention to the environment. That's not against God, that's working with God.
Well, the trees work with man, because
Absolutely.
we breathe oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide.
And
trees and plants, they inhale carbon dioxide and exhale.
Well, they use.
Yeah, they use the carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen.
Right, they don't have lungs, so they don't inhale.
That's right. They can't inhale.
We
they
think,
absorb.
They absorb. They absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen.
We have to perceive things more accurately.
Yeah.
Accurately.
that's one of the excuse me, I've got the hiccups, and that's what you're hearing, folks. But let's do the old finger pinch.
Does that
Yeah,
work?
that actually does. It even works on puppies.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
if you
my.
grab the little nerve that goes up there, it stops the spasm. That's the hiccup. And as you can see,
It kind of worked.
it kind of works. Yeah, it
Until
works.
you least expect it, right?
Well, that was very quick. Normally, it doesn't settle down quite that quick, but hopefully.
That's like an acupuncture point.
Well, it
Handy to
is.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, acupuncture is paying attention to the body and learning the meridian.
Yeah.
The Taoists, right,
Yeah.
have studied the body and know the energy lines. It's not just blood that circulates. They talk about qi, which is your life force,
Right.
circulating in your body as well, and that ailments are very often the blockage of, or kinks or something, caused by injury, caused by whatever, caused by internal violence. It can be a variety of things.
Internal violence, like the liver, for example. They're very, very keen on zeroing in on ailments that you're having because of your liver, which is amazing because it's ancient medicine.
Yeah.
We've known about it for a long time.
Yeah, we've known about it. People are surprised that, obviously the ancients, they looked at animals, they slaughtered animals, they ate animals, they figured out organs pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And they knew where to look. They knew from empiricism, right, from experience. If you've got 10 sick sheep and you cut them and all of their livers are diseased, then clearly the liver has something to do with it. That's not, as we would say, rocket science.
No, it's from
It's
observation.
from observation.
Yeah.
It's from looking and knowing your environment and being close to it. And, over time they learned that massaging certain things helps, that relaxing people a certain way helps, that we have a lot to do with our health. And, I saw that keenly reflected when I was a chaplain, in that, where I was a chaplain at the hospital in Ohio, we wrote down what was the spiritual condition of the patient. In other words, were they in despair, in which case they weren't going to get surgery, unless it was emergency surgery. And even then, the doctors didn't like to do it. But elective surgery, not going to do it if you're already predisposing yourself to have a bad outcome. Because again, over the years, doctors have learned that patient attitude has a lot to do with their ability to recover and to fight off disease.
What about expectations and
Yeah.
I'd say not just expectations, but intentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All works together like.
It all works together. And, we do create a lot more of our world. It's not, we have to work together with medicine. You can't, I had an ovarian cyst removed a number of years ago. That wasn't going to happen without surgery.
Right.
At least not with the medical knowledge that we have today. If it had ruptured, it would have been not a good thing.
No.
It would have created a big mess. And so surgically removing it was important, but having a really good attitude is why, I was up and out of the bed in hours after the surgery. If I had a lousy attitude, then I would hang to the bed more, and I wouldn't get the juices, the chi, moving around in my body. Yeah. So there's something to that. It's a way of describing things.
If you don't move that energy around correctly, it could be against you then.
It could be against you, be more likely to create a clot. Yeah. That's not to say that somebody can control that necessarily, but you can have an influence on it.
Okay.
It's not a if you're sick then it's a punishment or you're bad or something. That's not the case. Everybody gets sick, but within that illness, you have some input as to how it will go. We're all going to die, right?
That doesn't scare me.
Well,
Cause
it shouldn't.
We all pass.
Yeah.
We've all been around long enough to know that, when we're about maybe young adults, we lose our grandparents, and after that, the aunts and uncles, and then the parents. But we've all come to term with it, though. We're all not living in fear of it. We're just, it's part of life. Part of life.
Yeah, the most tragic thing that I can remember is, again, being a chaplain in Ohio, was sitting in a waiting room. There was a young man who had been, not his own fault at all. He had driven home somebody from church on a rainy night, was taking them home after an event, and got hit by a drunk driver. And he had been lingering in the hospital, had multiple broken bones. They weren't able to even do all the surgeries to repair everything because he was so shaky, so unstable. And the mother was cajoling, for lack of anything better to say, the siblings and the father, and saying, if our faith is strong enough, then God will save him. And I'm like, that's not what it's about. But of course, that's not what you can say as a chaplain in the moment.
I've met a lot of handicapped people who are angry over that because they're told that they don't have enough faith to heal.
Yeah, get up and walk.
Yeah.
No, that's not the point. You got to read that story a little more carefully at Bethesda. Again, to understand what's going on there, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's going on with the man that has to do with life choices. But if you're a paraplegic, you're a paraplegic. Can sometimes your body repair that? Sometimes. It's not just having faith. It's not just having a positive attitude. That's why I said you have an input into it, but you don't have the whole say. We don't totally control everything.
We can have an influence, though.
We can have an influence. And, and you see that. You see people who, are facing tremendous adversity, but they're managing. And then you have people that can't handle a hangnail.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so there's a little bit of teaching yourself to manage stuff in life, and that includes illness. It also includes minor setbacks, right? Do you yell at people because you can't control your own reaction to something, or because you're frustrated that you can't something or other? It's not about having enough faith or praying enough or any of that. There is stuff that's beyond what we can manage and control. And in the end of this, I was very, very naive at the time. And of course, I came to chaplaincy through my Jewishness. And the young man, eventually, he coded a number of times that night that I was with them. And after like the 6th or 7th code, they let him go. They let the boy go. And, and I turned to the parents and I said, so shall we pray? And they were so mad at God that, now they weren't going to have anything to do it. And, I don't give that marriage. I have no idea if they stayed married or not, but I did not give that marriage very long because I could see the argument, you didn't have enough faith. You didn't pray hard enough. That's why, and no, that's not true. God's not that petty.
No. If it's going to break you up and tear you apart as a couple or whatever, then
you're missing the point.
You're missing it.
Yeah, you're missing the point. But people do that. People do miss the point. Yeah. And, so that brings to one other point, and I'll continue that discussion when we get back to Ask a Rabbi at 11:30.
Okay.
But we're coming up on the last 8 to 10 minutes of this segment of this double Ask a Rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jewish answer to why is there evil is not that it's apart from God. Evil is, if God is all powerful and God is all things, guess what? Evil is part of God too. So, why is that there? That's always the question people ask. Is God punishing? And that's not the point. Is there discipline? Yeah, I think there is, and I think there's what I call divine 2x4s whopping you on the head. But God's not petty, and God's not this big egotist that's got to be praised. I think God's pretty cool with God's self. And so what's praise about? What's praise about and what's evil about? Those are topics that I'll touch on a little bit here, but we might continue on that a little later. I think that those challenges are for us to learn and to become compassionate with others. Because if you notice, it's only people who are a little bit hurting who are able to really connect with somebody. Somebody who's never experienced pain has a very hard time understanding when others are in pain. I had an experience of that when I lived in Tucson. I was visiting a congregant in the hospital who was a nurse. And this was the first time she had ever been a patient. And she was like, "Oh, I've got to go to the bathroom." And I'm like, yeah, that's why patients are kind of adamant about having to go to the bathroom. And, and I looked at her, I said, have you never been sick before this? And she said, no, never. And I'm like, so you really didn't understand the agony of your patients when you do one thing before you come and help them go to the bathroom. One more thing, because it's more convenient to do this while you're in the middle of it than to put it down and go take care of the patient. Okay. And, so it's having the pain teaches compassion and teaches understanding. No, we can't feel the same pain that somebody else feels.
I used to watch these old guys, and I had no idea what pain was because they'd be moaning and groaning and aching and pain, and my grandfather especially. Mm-hmm. But then later in life, I found myself making those same noises my grandfather used to make. Not so much now, but I mean, up until the surgery.
Up until the surgery.
Yeah.
You had a whole new understanding of pain.
Oh, yeah.
Right, or as I sometimes say, mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my parent after all.
Ooh. That's a good one.
Yeah. Right. But so some of the things that happen to us are, in fact, ways to learn compassion. And that's a key thing, I think, to look at the world as what's the lesson here? What can I learn from it? What can I glean? How can I use this to not only improve the situation for myself, but also for my fellow Earth passengers, right? My fellow neighbors, everybody around me. And there's nobody on the planet who was not created by God. Right.
Well, that's nice to know.
Yeah. If God is doing
everything. I'd hate to think there was somebody else out there creating people. I don't think it'd be...
Right. That whole idea that there's something separate from God that's doing these things is kind of polytheism in a really serious way.
Would that be like cloning and things like that?
Well, no, I don't think that's cloning.
Borderline?
No. Well, certainly some people think it is, right? Some people think that that's taking a little too much on. Okay. I think that we've got to, if we're going to do cloning, we've got to deal with things like replicative failure.
Ooh.
Yeah, right, because the clone is not quite the same.
I heard a very interesting story recently about a bull that had grown up as a perfect pet. So they cloned it. And they thought they had that same pet back again, but they didn't because that bull gored the man that had him cloned.
Yeah, well, because part of what you have is your genetic upbringing, but also really important is experience, and it plays a part too.
And individuality.
Right, and even if you clone something, you're getting one sample of the DNA in the creature, and just as the kids, and ask any mother about that, and the babies, right? It's got the same parents, but no two kids in a family, even a family of 10 or 20,
triplets and twins,
right, are not identical, even when they're identical.
Different fingerprints.
We call it right, because everybody's a little bit different. And so this has been step one.
That's right.
This
Part
Friday.
one.
Part one. We'll be back in 30 minutes after the Toys for Kids or
the Christmas Kids.
Or whatever it is that we're doing. That'll be the next half hour. And then at 11:30, be back with Ask a Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chayim.
Now, the good news is, for those watching this on YouTube, the second part is straight ahead.
That's right.
We take our break here. All right, you've been listening to Ask a Rabbi from Congregation Eitz Chayim. Alrighty. And all the folks watching on Facebook, greetings to you too. All right, stand by, the Christmas Kids. are straight ahead.